part 2 of this one-part series, we looked at how God allowed the extremely evil Canaanites to occupy the land of Canaan. I wonder if that's how they got the name Canaanites. Anyway, God allowed them to occupy the land of Canaan for 400 years while the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, something that never actually happened. At which point, God had finally had enough and decided that these people, even the babies, were so wicked that they had to be killed, or at least moved down the road a little bit. Let's join Alex O'Connor and Lobar Bill where we left off.
And as you say, the Old Testament makes it clear that God considered these people to be an immoral people, much in the same way that before the flood of Noah, we sort of have this pleading with God of saying, look, are there not any good people amongst this community? Are you really going to flood the entire world? Is there not one person worth saving? And as far as I know, most people defend God's action here by saying that the answer is no, that the society had become so corrupt that there wasn't any sort of salvageable morality. And I suppose something like that is going on with the Canaanites here. I suppose...
If I might comment, this is not simply biblically attested. I have a colleague, Professor Clay Jones, who has done a study of ancient literature coming out of pre-Israelite Canaan. And it is horrific, the culture that is described there. This was one that practiced not only all sorts of human sexual aberrations, but also temple prostitution in the worship of God. They practiced bestiality. There are texts describing how a buck would be strapped down to a wooden frame, and then women would mount the buck and copulate with it. They were engaged in offering child sacrifice to their gods. And so reading these ancient documents that are from pre-Israelite Canaan really bear out the truth of the biblical description of them, though the biblical description doesn't go into that kind of morbid detail that these documents do.
So I Google scholared Professor Clay Jones and couldn't find anything he'd published in scholarly journals. It doesn't appear that he has the background or credentials in this field for that kind of thing. He's a visiting scholar in Christian apologetics at a seminary. Shocking. Nor was I able to find any of these documents either on his website or on Dr. Craig's. Perhaps Alex can ask Bill to send us some links to these documents and their bona fides. I did find an article by Proclay Joe talking about why the Israelites couldn't have simply adopted the Canaanite children, or at least the babies. Apparently, the Israelite people were so incredibly weak that they would not have been able to resist the corrupting influence of these babies. Especially once they got older, having been raised as Hebrews, who, again, were just incredibly weak and susceptible to corruption. For the record, scholarly consensus is that the Israelites emerged from Canaan and were part of the various Canaanite clans. There's no evidence of this conquest, which makes it even more disgusting that someone would defend a genocide that never took place. This whole area was dominated and controlled by the Egyptians at the time, whose army was at the bottom of the Red Sea, if you'll remember. Another thing that never happened except for in the Hebrew fairy tale. Finally, there is debate on whether child sacrifice was being practiced in Canaan at the time. I've found scholars who say yea and scholars who say nay. Nor is child sacrifice something unknown in the Hebrew Bible, nor does it suggest anything but its efficacy. The child sacrifice of God's only begotten was apparently the best, most important thing ever to happen in the history of space-time. But that's a whole nother story.
I suppose I intuitively find it difficult to believe that there's not a single person in this community who is not so unsalvageably touched or consumed by sin in this way, that the actions we see the Israelites committing on the command of God can be justified. So to give people an idea, to give them the full picture, we've described who the Canaanites are, and I'm sure you'll have something to say about that, but the reason that this is a problem, the reason why Richard Dawkins is talking about these people, is because, as you say, God promises this land to the Israelites, and he waits 400 years and says this is because the sin sort of hasn't got bad enough yet, essentially. He says it will happen in 400 years because by that point things will be so bad that this will be sort of justifiably inflicted. But he commands the Israelites to destroy the Canaanites. And the language used in the Bible is quite extreme in a few different areas, talking about completely destroying a city, leaving nothing alive that breathes. And on the point about innocent people, because I know you'll have something to say about that, but we know that there are at least some innocent people among the Canaanites, because in the 6th chapter of Joshua, in the destruction of Jericho, it said that they devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Now, maybe the men and women were immoral. I certainly don't think that children living among the Canaanites were immoral enough to justify their being killed, and certainly not the cattle, the sheep, and the donkeys.
Right. The difficult, I think, aspect of this is the children. The adults were corrupt. If there was an innocent person among the adults, that person didn't have to be killed. It's important to understand that God's command to Israel was not genocide, despite a superficial first reading of these narratives.
Now here, Bill has a point. It's very easy to confuse this whole mess with genocide when God is commanding that the Israelites leave alive nothing that breathes, including the children, the toddlers, the babies, cattle, sheep, donkeys, the pet guinea pigs and rabbits, and let's not forget Shekel, the town mascot, a Mediterranean spur-thighed tortoise, etc. But don't worry, I'm sure Bill will, somewhere, have a distinction without a difference for us. Well, I'm sure you're going to want to hear more about this amazing divine command theory and how you too can defend and justify genocide. I think if you're honest with yourself, you'll have to admit that defending genocide is something we all aspire to. I know I don't. We'll pick things up right from here next time. Until then, I'm me. Thanks for watching.